could always stand on a chair.
Just in case I decide to write on the whiteboard. Okay, but I don't, well, actually, we might have a little whiteboarding things today. All right, so how's everyone doing?
Fine.
Good, good. We are, if you haven't noticed, drawing near to the end of the book of Deuteronomy. We've made it past our midway point, and we are hurtling towards the end. We know that, of course, even if we're not keeping up with the Torah portions, shame on you. But if you were just looking at the calendar, you would notice that what's coming up? Rosh Hashanah. And once Rosh Hashanah hits, basically the regular cycle of Torah readings gets thrown into chaos. Because we have got Rosh Hashanah, we've got Yom Kippur, we've got Sukkot. And so, yes, during the weeks, we kind of sneak in a few Torah readings here and there, but we basically get into a not exactly regular pattern until we hit Simchat Torah at the end of Shmini Atzeret, at the end after Sukkot, where we can finally reboot the whole Torah all over again. And that means, of course, contextually, that we're dealing with the case of Moses at the very, 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 very end of his discussion with the Jewish people, his leadership of the Jewish people, and all the implications thereof. Make sense? Everyone got a good feeling for where we are?
Yep.
Okay, so then it should come as no surprise that we're going to look at today one of his more famous speeches, his admonitions to the people, and preparing them for what they are about to encounter. With that, then we will turn to page number 1145. And we are looking at chapter 27, if you're in a different version. And we're going to pick up on verse 9. I do highly recommend, as I always say, to read the rest of this as well. But this is specifically Moses giving instructions for what's going to happen after they cross the River Jordan. He's not going to be there with them because he'll be dead by this point. But he's giving them instructions of, you're going to go across the Jordan River. He just gave them some instructions about building giant stones that were covered in plaster that had the instructions written on them. Right? It's a giant instruction book in life-size form. And now he's going to continue those instructions for the instructions after he's gone. Excuse me. We all good? Okay. Well, I need someone to interrupt, so are we going to volunteer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I start with there too?
Start on verse 9, actually.
Oh, verse 9.
Yep.
9. Yep. Moses and the Levitical priests spoke to all.
Spoke to all. Oh, your pages stuck together?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are thin
Spoke
pages.
to all Israel, saying, "Silence, hear, O Israel. Today you have become the people of the Lord your God. Heed the Lord your God and observe his commandments and his laws, which I enjoin upon you this day."
All right. Once again, commandedness really coming back as one of our strong things of the entire book of Deuteronomy. But he's not done with the implications for all of these commandments.
Thereupon Moses charged the people, saying, "After you have crossed the Jordan, the following shall stand on Mount Gerizim when the blessing for the people is spoken: Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin. And for the curse, the following shall stand on Mount Ebal: Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali.
All right, we'll pause real quick before we get to what's going to be said at this point. What's happening in this staging?
It's separated.
Okay, we're separating. All right, we got two mountains. All right, we got Mount Gerizim and we got Mount Ebal. And we are apparently putting tribes on one side and tribes on the other. Right, and then we are going to have, what are we going to have?
Blessing and a curse.
Okay, we're going to have blessings and curses, right? So we're going to have them standing on these different mountains, divided into two groups, and then blessings and curses are going to be proclaimed from or to each location.
Who decided who is going to be in each group? Moses or God?
Moses charged the people saying, okay, so we're going to come back to, well, wait a minute. how come you're in blessing squad and I'm in cursing squad?
Right, how did I get it?
Right, well, and
what did I do?
who do I have to talk to get put on the other mountain? Right? What happens if I don't like the camps that I'm with? Is there any pattern to the camps that are being divided up here? Right? That is something we're going to loop back around and look at some commentary on. But at the moment, I just want to make sure that we see that he's saying that there's going to be this this great ceremony, this great event, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, which is generally believed to be somewhere near Shechem in Israel, and that there is going to be this huge proclamation that is going to be undertaken. And like we said, we got blessings and we've got curses. So that is going to lead us then to verse 14.
The Levites shall then proclaim in a loud voice to all the people of Israel, Cursed be anyone who makes a sculptured or molten image of hoard, a craftsman handiwork, and it sets it up in secret. And all the people shall respond,
Amen. Right? So this is where we get that whole, the Imru, Amen. Right? Everybody says, Amen. So this is the first curse, right? Cursed be those who make idols, and everyone goes, Amen. Right? Yes. Now, what is the process? What's the pattern that's going on here? What is this kind of doing?
Does this go back to the golden calf?
Oh, this particular one absolutely is harkening back to the golden calf.
So it's like reminding, we're not going there again. Don't
Or
think about it.
saying the 10 Commandments in a different words.
So there's a way to try and connect them to the 10 Commandments, although your numbering is going to be off because we don't actually have 10 statements here. But we do have basically not only God giving commandments, but the people absolutely agreeing with these commandments. And as you're going to find, these particular commandments are pretty much all done in secret. Right? This is not, cursed is one who murders someone else, because, me, dead body, there were at least 2 people involved. These are usually things that were done by people in secret, or that they're trying to keep secret. And so this way of saying, I solemnly swear I won't do this, even if I could get away with it, is a way of publicly putting yourself on the line for being susceptible to the curse. You're inviting it because no one else will be able to curse you because they won't know you did it. But you'll know, and you've already set yourself up to be the victim of a curse if you do happen to transgress this. Follow some of that logic, maybe? Okay, so let's go ahead and run through the other curses.
Cursed be he who insults his father or mother, and all the people shall say Amen. Cursed be he who moves his fellow countryman's landmark, and all the people shall say Amen.
That's moving like the marker for the property boundary, right? If we say, my farm goes up to this rock, and then during the middle of the night, you move the rock, well, what proof do I have, right?
Yeah,
Except
we have had experience.
Oh, yeah, yes.
property lines.
Almost everybody who has a neighbor has at least at some point had a dispute about, wait a minute, let me get out the assayer,
Yeah.
showing exactly where the property lines are. And you can imagine when you didn't have a city hall that kept track of property lines in the old days, someone moving someone else's rock would have been a huge problem.
Yeah.
So again, you're doing this in the middle of the night, there's very little way to prove that this person did it, but nonetheless, they have taken upon themselves by saying yes, that this will be a curse against them.
Cursed be he who misdirects a blind person on his way, and all the people shall say Amen.
Again, yeah, someone asks for directions and you give them the wrong directions and they're blind. A, they're going to go the wrong way, and B, they won't even know who to blame. Right? Somebody told me to go this way. They can't identify exactly who. So this is, again, another secret crime.
Cursed be he who subverts the rights of the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and all the people shall say Amen.
Again, these are people who wouldn't have a family to stand up for them. So if they say, hey, he cheated me, there's no one to be there on their side. And there would often be no evidence then against you, and you get away with it.
Cursed be he who lies with his father's wife, for he has removed his father's garment. And all the people shall say Amen.
Again, this isn't talking just about your mother, which has a whole different layer of incest problems. This is talking about a different wife of your father that you are not biologically related to.
Cursed be he who lies with any beast, and all the people shall say Amen.
We're still cursing.
I'm still turning. Cursed be he who lies with his sister, whether daughter of his father or of his mother, and all the people shall say Amen. Cursed be he who lies with his mother-in-law, and all the people shall say Amen.
I know nowadays people go, oh yeah, who'd ever want to sleep with their mother-in-law? But remember, ages of getting married, ages of having children. If you get married at, let's say, 17, and you've got a kid, who gets married when they're 17, then that means you've got a 17-year-old bride or groom and a 17-year-old 34-year-old set of in-laws. And 34 is not exactly ancient. And so for there to still be possibility of romantic involvement or just lust was not considered impossible. In fact, there were often cases of this in the ancient world when they talk about these problems of intergenerational seduction.
Okay. Cursed be he who strikes down his fellow countryman in secret, and all the people shall say Amen. Cursed be he who accepts a bride in the case of the murder of an innocent person, and all the people shall say Amen.
Right, so that's referring to the judge, not someone being bribed to murder. That's someone being bribed to overlook the murder.
Does that include witnesses too?
Is well specifically understood to be the judge, but yes, obviously witnesses who are perjuring themselves to aid in a murder are also subject to this problem.
Like David and Bathsheba. Did he send her husband out to get kids?
It's complicated. Yeah, it's complicated. It definitely was not a laudable behavior, but it's unclear exactly what he did that was precisely wrong due to the complicated nature of whether or not she was technically divorced at the time. But that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. Cursed be he who will not uphold the terms of his teaching and observe them, and all the people shall say Amen.
Okay, so we finished the chapter. Great. What's missing?
The blessings.
The blessings, right? I know we got so caught up in all these curses, but remember, one was going to be for blessings and one was going to be for curses. And we just went through a whole list of curses. How many curses, by the way? But you're the one who said it reminds me of the Ten Commandments.
11.
11? You sure about that,
1,
Captain?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Maybe I miscounted.
Oh no,
Would you
1,
count?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12.
Thank you. That's what I thought. All right. All right. So we've got 12 curses here, and apparently 0 blessings.
Maybe it's the opposite.
Maybe it's the opposite. Now, one answer to this is to generously say, well, we could keep reading in verse 28, or chapter 28, but that does seem to be a change of theme, where it says, if you obey the commandments, God will do good things for you, and then there will be blessings that will come on. And then we get on page 1149, we get blessed in the city, blessed in your womb, blessed in your basket, blessed in your coming and going. We get 4 statements of blessings. And then we get some other stuff about fighting. However, the problem with interpreting that as being the counter blessings, in addition to them being too few, is the fact that if you turn to page 1151, which is chapter 28, verses 15 and 16, we get the exact inverse of the blessings that we just saw in chapter 28 as curses. So if the blessings in the beginning of chapter 28 are meant to be the parallel to the curses in 27, then what do we make of the obvious parallel curses in the middle of 28 that seem to be matching the blessings at the beginning of 28? So we don't really get any blessings to go along with the curses. And believe it or not, I'm sure you'll be surprised by this bothered our sages as well. Yeah. We're not the first people to discover that the blessings seem to be missing. And it's like, wait, you promised some blessings too, not only curses. So, what happened? All right. So
I think in chapter 28, the beginning is basically a general blessing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chapter 28 seems to be another. It's good to follow the commandments kind of chapter,
Yeah.
and then we get a few examples of some general goodness that will come from that. It does not seem to be the whole Gerizim Ebal curses and blesses,
Well, everyone.
table match.
Everyone
tennis
who's
match.
on Abel, with the curses, at least I know Reuben, and has something to do with the curses. I mean, they can have a guilty conscience. But the
Well,
people
the
who were
one
over
You mean
on.
the whole slept with his father's wife thing?
Yeah, that whole thing. But the others got to be standing there wondering.
What am I doing?
Okay, so first,
I'm on a hill with nothing.
all right. So first, let's unpack what we do about these missing blessings. Then we're going to talk about the groupings that are on these two mountains. But first, we got to find our missing blessings, because it's not fair that we've got 12 curses and 0 blessings, because it sounds like the people on Gerizim are doing nothing, right? It's all Abel is all announcing the curses, and Gerizim is just sitting there going, okay. So let's go ahead and see what's talking about the people standing where. So the first text comes from Rashi, which is he's channeling from the Talmud. And Andrea, do you mind keep reading?
Sure. These shall stand up to bless the people. The procedure was as is found in Sotah. 6 tribes ascended the top of Mount Gerizim, and the other 6 the top of Mount Ebal. The priests, the Levites, and the ark remaining below the midst.
In the midst.
In the valley between.
All right. So the idea here is that we've got the Kohanim, the Levi'im, and of course the ark down here in the valley. All right.
With the people.
That's Kohanim and that's Levi'im. No. We've got the people on the mountains.
Right.
All right. We got all
the tribes?
the happy
They're
people
they're like
on the
a
mountain.
theater.
They're the
Oh.
audience.
Oh, I see.
It's like a theater.
It's like a theater, and in
It's kind of
fact,
like an arena with 2 crowds on 2 sides.
right. And in fact, if you go to Shem, the traditional location that's believed for this does feel a bit like an amphitheater, where you have this valley in the middle and you have these 2 mountains on either side. And it does feel like you could put, a whole nation on each one and then, speak to them, and that would work. So that there is some topographical support for this kind of layout. So this is our procedure. We've got the ark, we've got the Kohanim, we have the Levi'im down in the middle. The people are clustered on the mountains as described. Onward.
Blessed be the man that does not make.
But the Levites turn first.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Levites turned their faces toward Mount Gerizim and began to recite the blessing. Blessed be the man that does not make any graven or molten image, etc. And both these and those, the tribes on Mount Gerizim and those on Mount Ebal answered, Amen.
Okay, wait a minute. The blessed be the man who does not make any graven or molten image? I didn't see that. Did we skip that one?
No, it was
No.
curse.
That was very beginning.
Really?
That was the
Verse
one.
15. Cursed be anyone who makes a
Okay,
sculpture of a molten
right.
image. Abhorred by the Lord, the craftsman's handiwork, and set it upon a secret, all the people shall respond, Amen. What's going on here?
Inverse.
Inverse. You want to know what the blessing is? The blessing is the curse, with the word curse replaced with the word blessing. Right? So if the one who makes the molten image is cursed, then the one who doesn't make the molten image is blessed. Right? So you just basically scratch out the word curse, you write the word bless, you take the verb and you put the word don't,
Right.
and you're good. Right? So if it says, cursed is the one who moves the fellow's landmark, then blessed is the one who doesn't move the guy's landmark. Right? Cursed is the one who sleeps with his father's wife. Blessed is the one who doesn't sleep with his father's wife. We've seen how the rabbis are finding our 12 blessings.
Yeah.
Right? They found the perfect parallel match. And now this is again literarily very sound, because what do we see when we look very briefly in chapter 28 was we saw pretty much exactly this inverse. We saw blessed is the one in his going and coming, and then we saw cursed is the one in his going and coming. So we saw blessings and curses and results, not because of actions, as being mirrors, and now we're taking the actions and just making the mirror to invert, as you pointed out, and find our blessing. Work? Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
However, we're going to continue this, and then I'm going to point out another little issue here. Then
they turned their faces toward Mount Ebal and began to recite the curse, saying, "Cursed be the man who makes any graven or molten image." And so in the case of all of them, the curse is set forth here, till the last, "Cursed be he that does not uphold all the words of this law to do them." Rashi.
okay. So I thought in the text we have the curses. But what are we starting with for the proclamations? According to this version within Sota, within our tradition. Blessings. So it's not like we're actually saying the phrase that's in the Torah and then we're inverting it. We are saying the inverted phrase before reciting the original, if you want to call it the phrase. The blessing comes before the curse. Now, why would it be that way? There's a philosophical reason, and then of course there is a textual reason.
The philosophical reason is you want to encourage.
Yeah. Blessings are good.
Blessings are good.
Right.
We want to take care of it first before we come at you with the stick.
Exactly. It's not about just warning people away. It is about encouraging people to come near to the commandments, to follow God, and all of that. And philosophically, blessings are what we seek in life, often more than we try to avoid curses. However, textually, there's another excellent reason, which is if you go back to, I'm sure I'm on the right page, chapter 27 still, and we're in now verse 10. Right, the following shall stand on Mount Gerizim when the blessing for the people is spoken. Which gets listed first? Blessings. Right, the text talks about doing a blessing towards Mount Gerizim first. Well, it talks about doing a blessing that is somewhat Gerizim focused, and then it talks about doing curses that is somewhat Ebal focused. As we're also finding out, the people on both sides were saying Amen. So it's not like we only had to worry about these guys admitting to the blessings. To the curses, and these guys were only having to admit to the blessings. Everybody was admitting to all of it, right? Everyone said amen to the blessings. Everyone said amen to the curses. Make sense? But since Gerizim and blessings are mentioned first, then, then they get first dibs on that. Very logical, very Jewish. All right, but we're not done yet with figuring out what to do about these blessings. So we're going to continue. This is from Sifrei, again, one of the Midrash Halacha, one of the earliest layers of exposition of our texts.
What is this type?
No, that's just that's the way that Ebal, the mountain, is pronounced in Hebrew.
Okay. Okay, then you shall deliver the blessing on Mount Gerizim. What is the intent of this? If to teach that the blessing is on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal, has this not already been stated?
Right, because we get the idea that we need to do this blessing mentioned later on in the Torah as well. So if we're mentioning it twice, it can't just be for emphasis, right? Because that God doesn't waste words like that. So if we've already been told to do these blessings and curses, now we're being told to do them again. There must be some other instruction that's coming.
It's intent that this blessing is to precede cursing. I might then think that all of the blessings are to precede all of the curses. It is therefore written the blessing and the curse.
Okay, so but one of the problems of reading Midrash Halacha is it's written in very, very short phrases that require you to unpack them. And you can't just read it like a full paragraph. So what we're getting here is the underpinning for what Rashi brought us in our first text, which is to say, I might have thought that I should do the curses first, but since we mentioned the mountain for a blessing first, we're going to do the blessings first, because that was why it was repeated to tell me to deliver the blessing on Mount Gerizim. Second point, I might have thought then, if I'm doing blessings before curses, that I should do all the blessings, all 12, blessed is, blessed is, blessed is, blessed is, all the way down. And then cursed is, cursed is, cursed is, cursed is, all the way down. How do I know that's not the case? Remembering, as always, that every time I might have thought I would have been wrong when we're talking about Jewish texts, right? When that's a technical phrase that gets used. How do I know that's not the case? Because it says the blessing, the curse, that is a singular term. Right? So it's do the blessing, do the curse, do the blessing, do the curse, rather than do the blessings and do the curses. Make sense? Okay, onward.
One blessing precedes one curse, and all other blessings do not precede all the curses. And blessing is hereby being likened to curse. Just as the curses were indicted by the Levites, so the blessings. And just as the curses were indicted loudly, so the blessings.
So as you can see, they're going to say, all right, now the blessings which are sort of hidden, we're going to extrapolate that we'll do them exactly the same way that we're doing the curses. If the Levites did the curses, as we saw in verse number 14, then we're going to interpret that to mean that the blessings should also be done by the Levites. If the Levites are the ones who are doing this in Kol Ram, which is a loud voice, it's like, proclaiming it loudly is probably the best way, then that means the blessings must have also been done the same way. And onward.
And just as the curses were indicted in the holy tongue, so the blessings.
Meaning they did them in Hebrew rather than some translation.
And just as the curses generically and specifically, so the blessings generically and specifically. And just as the curses all answered Amen, so with the blessings. They turned their faces at the time of the blessings to Mount Ebal, and at the time of the curses to Mount Gerizim.
All right, so just a little taste on how Sifrei works, on how Midrash Halacha works. Questions? All right, now we get to our cast of characters. We've got 12 tribes, at least as they're being lumped for this. Remember, that is the ongoing tension throughout the whole middle of the Torah, is that who counts as part of the 12? Because we have a couple variables, a couple wild cards. One of them is Joseph. Sometimes Joseph gets included, but when Joseph is included, then Manasseh and Ephraim are not. And sometimes Levi is included, but Levi is usually included when we have Joseph. But if Joseph is out, Levi is usually out, and Ephraim and Manasseh are in. Now, what is the difference? Usually when we're talking about the allocation of land, Levi and Joseph are out, and Manasseh and Ephraim are in, because Joseph didn't get land himself. The land went to his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and the Levites didn't get land. The land went to everyone else, and they supported the Levites and the subcategory of Kohanim. But if you're talking about just the people, then the actual 12 biological sons of Jacob would include Joseph and Levi, and Ephraim and Manasseh are not included because they're sort of subsumed underneath Joseph himself. Make sense? Question?
Slightly separate topic. You said the Levites were in the middle doing the proclamation, and yet they're on
Mount Gerizim.
Gerizim. So
yeah. So same thing with the Kohanim. Right?
Yeah.
The Kohanim are also a subpart of Levi. So the presumption is that it was not everybody that was a Levite, doing it, but that you had the people running the show, and then all the rest of the Levites were on Gerizim.
Because not every Levite is assigned to do duties.
At that particular moment, exactly. Right. And not every Levite or Kohen sometimes could do certain duties, depending upon ritual purity and other issues.
all of the Kohanim and some of the Levine were in the middle, in the valley.
Probably. I don't remember specifically anyone saying that all the Kohanim did, but as a Kohen, maybe you would assume that. You want to be in the middle. I want to be the Kol Ram, the loud voice. Okay, now, if you look in the middle of our handout, you will see a quick cheat sheet for those of you that have not memorized the family tree of Jacob, because most of us don't, of all of the children of Leah, all of the children of Zilpah, and all the children of Bilhah, and all the children of Rachel. And of course, the first two are linked together because Zilpah's children were considered to be Leah's, and the last two are linked together because Bilhah's children were considered to be Rachel's. You're following? Mm-hmm. And you can also find the letters that tell you which mountain each tribe was standing on. Okay, so we good? Any questions on the alignments? All right, well, let's see what Chizkuni, one of our commentators, is sharing with us about this.
The following are to stand. All the tribes that stood on the mountain listening to the blessings were descended from Jacob's principal wives, Leah and Rachel.
All right, so let's just make sure we got that. All right, when we're talking about all the people on Mount Gerizim, these are all from Rachel or Leah directly. All right, there's no one standing on this mountain that came from one of the handmaidens.
Right.
Seeing that Leah had so many sons, they took the oldest and the youngest of these and placed them with the 4 tribes that were descended from the auxiliary wives. Leah's oldest son, who had been under suspicion of having committed an inappropriate act with one of Jacob's secondary wives, was placed there so that the curse on people sleeping with their neighbors or their father's wives would be impressed on the descendants of his who heard it.
Okay, so what's the idea here? Before you flip over the page, right? The idea is that we had the children descended, or the descendants of the main wives all over here, and descendants of the auxiliary over here, but that would have come up short,
So even.
right? Because we had 8 and 4.
Yeah.
So we had to get 2 volunteers to move from Gerizim over to be with the others. And which did they choose? They chose the oldest and the youngest, which is a very interesting way of almost kind of putting a bookend around the others. Now, they're not the youngest in the sense of actual birth order. Zvulun is not, for example, younger than Joseph or Benjamin for that matter. So it's more figuratively of putting them over there. If they had done, the youngest, meaning Benjamin, then, Benjamin was one of the favorites. So you definitely wouldn't want to put him over there with those people. But Zvulun, he's kind of extra. So we have the oldest and the youngest, and we get an explanation for the oldest, which is Reuven. Reuben was famous for the incident with his father's couch. When Rachel died, Bilhah became the new favorite person for him to be with. And Reuben took exception with that basically his mom, Leah, playing second fiddle to Rachel while Rachel was alive was one thing, but for his mom to play second fiddle to Rachel's handmaiden after Rachel was dead, he wasn't going to stand for that. The text is very ambiguous. Some simply say that he moved where his dad's sleeping arrangements were. Others say that he actually went to his father's secondary wife, to Bilhah, and was with her in an intimate way. But this seems to be picking up on the idea that at least that was the intention, and therefore his descendants needed to hear especially, don't sleep with your father's wife, because they might have thought, well, if it was good enough for great-granddad, and no, it's not good enough for great-granddad, and it's not good enough for you.
So I don't understand the significance of dividing everybody up, since everybody hears both the blessings and the curses, one after the other, the blessing and then reinforced by the curse.
Exactly.
So I don't understand, what's the significance of splitting them up in the first place?
Which is why our commentators are noticing things, but are having trouble coming up with solid explanations. They get that one explanation there for Reuben, of putting him over there because...
But is he going to hear the curses better on that mountain as opposed to the blessings better on the other mountain?
No, but being on the mountain where the curses are aimed, if you will, might make you more susceptible to hearing this. Now, we can argue again, if they're going to be getting the blessings and the curses, if he'd been sitting over here, or standing, as they make very clear, he would have heard the blessing, blessed is the one who doesn't sleep with his father's wife, which one would think would also have a very powerful effect on any descendants who were thinking of copying great-granddad's behavior, or some not the genealogist, multiple great-grandparents at that point. So you're right, what is the significance is something that our commentators are trying to dig out of this. Because they were divided, there is this clear pattern of having all the people on this mountain be from Rachel or Leah, and the majority of the people over here being non-Rachel and Leah, except for the oldest and the youngest. And he was able to come up with a good explanation for the oldest, but there's definitely a feeling, and this is borne out throughout archaeology and the other later texts of Book of Judges and Joshua and onward, that there did seem to be more connection between the children of Leah and Rachel and then the children of the handmaids.
Right.
They didn't seem to always be getting their fair shake. There was some tension between these two camps, if you will. But that may or may not be exactly what's going on here. But that's the point, is that sometimes we don't get perfectly satisfying answers. We're going to get another alternative, this time talking about Shimon, about why he got to be on the, in quote, good mountain.
Yeah.
So Rabbeinu Bachya is helping us on the back page.
The reason the tribe of Shimon was also associated with the tribes in whose direction the blessings were pronounced was that the Torah lists here 11 different curses, and the Torah wanted to avoid pronouncing a curse in his direction.
Now we know there is a total of 12 curses, but the 12th one is a generic one, which is why they're listing the 11 specific, where, you know, he might feel they were talking to me. Now, notice that Rabbeinu Bachya is essentially reversing the logic that put Reuben on the other mountain. Right? Reuben got over here so that he would have to hear the curse. Shimon is being put over here so that he won't have to hear a curse. Now, why would there be a difference? Well,
Moses decreed that all the tribes receive a blessing. Seeing, however, that the tribe of Shimon was not deserving of a blessing on account of Zimri, its leaders, who had caused so much death amongst his own people, he wanted to at least not to make it appear as if he were being cursed, of associating the word cursed with something pronounced in his direction. Had he allowed this to occur, Shimon would have been beyond redemption.
all right, so what was Zimri's curse? What was his problem?
He slept with this woman in front of everybody.
Yep, he was sleeping with the Midianite woman who was seducing the Israelites towards idolatry, and Phineas came up with a big spear and took both of them in one shot. 2 birds, 1 spear. So that is still ringing in their ears of having been this more relatively recent event, and he knows that Shimon, the tribe, it feels guilty that their leader had caused this whole problem that led to the deaths of thousands of people, and therefore they're on the verge of thinking they're beyond redemption. And so if they're over here and a curse gets said towards them, they're going to feel crushed. That'll be the straw that'll break their back. They will no longer feel that they can be redeemed. They're out, right? They quit because they're beyond salvation. And so therefore Moses judiciously sticks them over here so that even though they're going to hear the curses, it won't seem like it's aimed at them, so that they will realize that they may not be deserving of a blessing right now, but that it is still meant for them. And therefore they will not give up, they will continue to go, and they won't be wiped out. Question?
Is the R here for?
Rob.
Rob.
Yes. So getting ready for the next paragraph. Thank you.
This is a little off point, but who are the Midianites? Because didn't Jethro come from them and he was actually a priest?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, welcome to the wide world of confusing family relations.
Yeah.
And what happens when everyone gets together for Thanksgiving and you go,
Yeah, right.
remember how your other relatives showed up and like tried to curse us? And then, you know, we had this whole thing where they were seducing people for idolatry. It's like, well, yeah, but we got Jethro. Jethro's a good guy. So yeah, the ancient nations around Israel, we had some good people come from some of them, and we had some bad people come from some of them.
But Jethro being so high up could have made him stop?
Well, Jethro being so
He
high
didn't
up,
need to be around.
it seems
Right.
to be that Jethro, once he became familiar with Moses and acknowledging God, did not have the same standing among his people. It's almost as though the person who stands up in the middle of Vatican City and says, I don't want to be Catholic anymore, is not the next guy made Pope. Even if he was a high-ranking cardinal beforehand.
Cardinal to begin with.
I mean, you can see that literally with Martin Luther. You know, Martin Luther was doing all right for himself in the Catholic circles. Once he began to protest, he was told to go make his own religion. That's not exactly what he was told, but that's what ended up happening. So yeah, Jethro may have come from Midian, but that doesn't mean that he had any standing at the point of the fight here to stop them, or to stop them from trying to curse in the first place.
So, you know, part of who ends up on what mountain is Moses showing us here that different people and even different groups of people are going to be motivated differently. And if you're trying to be a competent leader, you have to take this into account.
Right. And that, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, from what you were saying, that Reuben could deal with it because that's generationally away. And it would make the other 4 tribes feel like, okay, we're not being belittled because we're over here, because Reuben's with us.
The eldest.
He's the eldest,
Right.
and he's number 1.
And whatever reflections they take will be about a historical crime committed by an ancestor multiple generations ago,
Right.
which they may still need a little reinforcing on,
Right.
but they won't take it as personally.
But as every younger child knows, sometimes the older child is the first to do something really stupid, and so it's always reminded of that.
Right.
And the parents say, do you remember your older brother?
But it's still historical. Whereas what's happening with Shimon? Right?
But Shimon is like recent.
A little
Exactly.
sensitive, he's sensitive.
It's not just being sensitive, it's current events,
Yeah, it just happened.
right? It just happened, to some degree, maybe months, maybe a little bit more ago. They are still reeling from the death. There are people who are probably still in mourning because of the people who died from all of what Shimon caused, and or at least certainly have not said their first yard site. And that makes it all an open wound, a fresh.
Right.
And what the question then becomes, how do you take someone who has that fresh open wound, and how do you bring them back to God, to Torah, to everything? Do you curse them more, or do you give them a hint of a blessing? You don't condone the behavior. I mean, obviously Pinchas was considered right for what he did, more or less. There's some commentary about exactly how he did it, but it needed to be done, sort of. And definitely Shimon was wrong. No one's trying to be morally relativistic here and say that it was okay what Shimon was doing, Zimri in particular. But it's still, we don't want to just blame people. We want to fix the situation. And how do we fix a situation that is so raw, so exposed as this? Well, you give them the emphasis on the blessing rather than the emphasis on the curse when it's that raw. And then if it's more historical, then you can work on the other. Right? Quick modern example of this. How do you help Germany recover after World War II? Not financially and all of that, but morally and ethically.
Not like you did after World War I.
Right. So we obviously had a different incentive to help them financially, which was, regarding the stopping the spread of the Soviet Union that was coming westward. But how do you help Germany advance morally? Do you continue to say all Germans are evil, all Germans are terrible, all Germans are Nazis, all Germans, we want nothing to do with you, you're all a bunch of horrible pigs? Or do you, when it shows up to the new state of Israel offering reparations for the Holocaust, do you accept the money?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the ultimate answer was yes, but it wasn't an easy answer.
Easy.
Right? It was not an easy discussion. But the ultimate answer was that it was better to accept than it was to reject. Even if part of us wanted to say, this is current events, and we are still reeling from the murder of 6 million plus people of our own, let alone what you did to the rest of the world. But you clearly want to make amends. You want to be part of the fellowship of nations again as humans rather than as monsters. And this is a gesture that heads in that direction. The reparations you're talking about make the right statement of what you want to achieve. So it was chosen to accept. Right? They were put on this mountain rather than that mountain, if you will. And that tension of how do we help people be redeemed and how do people help themselves be redeemed is what's going to take us to our midrash to finish off. Now this is technically from Nitzavim, which is the next Torah portion, which is when God gathers everyone together and sort of reemphasizes our collective connection. But we'll see where the midrash takes us.
Hezekiah, the son of Rahiah, said, why is this parsha next to the parsha about curses?
Right. Why is Nitzavim, the section where God gathers us all together again, well, Moses gathers us, but for God, right next to the whole section that we just got finished with all these curses?
Because Israel heard 100 curses less 2 in this parasha, apart from the 49 which are uttered in the priestly Torah. They immediately turned green in the face and said, "Who can withstand these curses?"
All right, so yeah, remember we saw the blessings as being sort of hidden mirrors of the curses, but there were a lot of curses, and if you read the rest of the text, there's also a lot of cursed things happening. So you can imagine that being incredibly demoralizing to the nation as Moses is saying, now all this bad stuff will happen to you if you do bad stuff. It's like, oh man, we're dead, right? Because we know we're going to mess up. We know we're going to get, therefore, these curses. So why bother? Onward.
Then Moses summoned all of Israel and said unto them, "You have seen all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, the great trials which your eyes saw, the signs and those great wonders. When you came unto this place, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan, came out to engage us in battle, but we defeated them."
All right, so that whole beginning of Nitzavim is God gathering everyone together, right? All of the people of the nation, and then saying, "You've seen bad stuff. You saw what happened to the Egyptians. You saw what happened to Og, and you saw what had happened to Bashan. You've seen all of this stuff going on, or Heshbon. What?
They haven't seen it.
No, they have. Well, they weren't alive in Egypt,
They weren't
unless they were under 20 years old, in which case they were.
Oh, okay.
Right, and I think most 19-year-olds would remember what happened when they were 59 if it was the Exodus of Egypt. So there was still a population that had seen Egypt firsthand that were under 20 years old at the time. Well, at the time of the rejection. So God is saying, look at these other nations, look what happened to them, and I also helped you. Now, why is that comforting? Well,
"And you did not heed my voice, and you uttered words before me for which you deserve destruction. Still I did not wreak destruction upon you, when it is stated."
in Psalms. I'm just making sure people get the references. Psalms 106, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. "When our ancestors were in Egypt, they did not consider your wondrous works. And not only that, but they said that of the calf in Exodus 32:4, your God, O Israel."
All right, so he's saying, look, you saw the destruction of Egypt, you saw the destruction of these other people, and you guys have done stuff worthy of destruction, right? We see from Psalm 106 that you didn't really appreciate what God was doing in Egypt, and for crying out loud, you built a golden cow and called it God. So God could have wiped you out at that point, and there was a lot of back and forth between God and Moses about whether that was the appropriate thing.
Right.
So the people should feel that God has already spared them the worst possible destructions that could have happened, which other nations have gotten. Which is going to lead us then to the question, well, why did the other nations get smashed? Why didn't we? Right? Then it's like, well, wait, what does this mean when we say there's a curse? If the curse is, I'm not actually going to carry it out, then as any parent will tell you, as soon as you warn a child about a particular thing, if the child does it, you have to carry through, right? You have to be good to the warning and say, if you play with that again, if you play with the matches, then you're not going to get to go to Tommy's birthday party. As soon as he plays the matches again, he better not be going to Tommy's birthday party, because otherwise, if you say, oh, well, I guess it's an important party, so you can go, then the kid's going to be playing matches for the rest of his life. Right? You have to follow through. I'm not saying that that's the appropriate warning to give, but if you give it, then you better stick to it. Okay, so then we have to say, well, wait a minute, why did they get wiped out? Why didn't we?
Now, if you should say, for what reason did the other nations deserve destruction while we are remaining alive? It is because when afflictions come upon them, they kick against them and do not mention the name of the Holy One, blessed be He, as stated in Psalm 79:6. Pour out your wrath upon the nations that have not known you, upon the kingdoms that cannot invoke your name.
All right, so what's the lesson that we're learning from this? When bad stuff happens to these other nations, they don't turn to God, right? When they get a curse, they curse God. When they get a curse, they say, this is terrible, it's unfair, blah, 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 blah. And guess what? It keeps affecting them, and it keeps happening. And we saw this very clearly with Pharaoh. When, the plagues began, what did Pharaoh do? He doubled down. right? He did not say, wow, this God thing is kind of different than anything I knew about gods before, but clearly the real deal, off you go because we want less of this and more of that God. No.
Yeah.
Instead, it was like, no, I'm God too, and I'm going to fight. And of course, that led to worse and worse and worse situations. The contrast, of course, is what happens when Israel has a problem. In the case.
In the case of Israel, however, when afflictions come upon them, they submit and pray as stated in Psalms 116, 3-4. I found trouble and sorrow, but I shall invoke the name of the Lord. Therefore the Holy One, blessed be he, said, even though these maledictions come upon you, they themselves stand you up.
Okay, so even though you will have a curse, the curse will support you. Right? The curse is going to bring with it its own remedy because of your response to what these problems will be.
And so it says in Deuteronomy 8:16, in order to humble you and in order to test you, so as to benefit you in the end.
Right, so we had these curses when we had broken the rules because God knew our response would be to get stronger in response to them and turn back to God with greater vigor. And therefore, in the end, we would end up better than we were before the curse kicked in. Right? So God knew what our response would be. Just like Moses had to figure out how Shimon would respond, how Reuben would respond, God understands how all of us are going to respond. And yeah, it may look like there are a lot of curses, but when these curses come into play, and they do basically because we do mess up things horribly, especially during the First Temple period, then we can understand that in the long term, we will turn back to God and then things will get better. And the curses only happen because we were doing horrible, horrible things like, attacking people, sleeping with our mother-in-laws and doing other things that you shouldn't be doing. Making sense so far? So let's just bring it to the finale.
Thus did Moses say to Israel, even though afflictions come upon you, you have a standing. It is therefore stated in Deuteronomy 29:9, you are standing today, all of Midrash
Tanhuma. Midrash Tanhuma, that's just the source. So basically saying, after getting 98 different curses, you're still standing. Right? You're still standing. Now, this is an amazing statement about how Judaism has survived and how we have returned to God over and over again despite catastrophes that befall us. But this is also, from these three different sections, a very important thing for our own reflections during this time of Elul, this month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, of how will we reflect and review on the good and the bad that has been our previous year. Right? Will we resent it and run away and say we cannot be redeemed? Will we say, well, that was in the past, but I still need to be reminded? Or will we say that it was something that has happened, but it's going to make me stronger by going forward? And all three are the correct responses for different types of situations and different aspects of what we need to be thinking about during this time. The true wisdom is being able to tell which is the correct response. Right? Which do I allow myself to do? And of course, the overall answer is the response that is needed is the response that makes you do better. Right? The response that is needed is the response that helps pick you up, not push you further down or away, because that response leads to annihilation. Questions, comments?
We have two books on this issue, right?
We have
Job and Jonah.
Job and Jonah, well, actually, I mean, all of the books of the prophets are about how do we respond to God saying, don't, when God is trying to tell us not to do something. And then how do we respond after the destruction is very much the whole focus of the book of Ezra, Nehemiah, and some of the later prophets. But Job is a much more personal look rather than a national look. But even within the lives of different people throughout the Tanakh, we see snippets. David, in response to his misbehavior with Bathsheba and then the death of his child, is very much showing how a person responds to that kind of catastrophe as well. And then the opposite, of course, is how Saul responds when God is rejecting him. Saul also has trouble. So sometimes we learn by people setting a good example. Sometimes we learn by people being a bad example.
Right. Those two books are like dedicated to this issue, though, right?
Well, Jonah, a little bit more broadly than just this. Job is very heavily built on this, yes.
Oh, good.
I noticed.
Is there a question?
Anybody
What?
else notice that there's a whole